Alright, we're going to go over the procedure to take a Fairmont two-piece front axle apart. After you've removed the axle from the car, got the bearing housings off and the axle collars, you'll be left with just the axle ends, the axle sleeve, and of course you got your grease fitting and your through bolt. What you want to do is put the axle in a vise. I'll put it in the pipe end of the vise where you would normally catch a piece of pipe. Catch the sleeve into it. Don't get real tight on it, just enough to snug it and hold it is what you want to do. The next thing we want to do is be sure the axle's cleaned up as best as possible. Try to clean it up, pretty good. Get the any excess paint and grease, oil off of it. Then what we'll do, we're going to take this grease fitting out next, and we're going to take this through bolt out. And I'll do that. Okay, now I've got the bolt and washers off and the grease fitting. I've removed those, as you can see. Now, sometimes the axle is a little difficult to shove through the sleeve. Now, if it's bent, you'll need to, if one end is bent really bad, of course, you'll need to shove that in away from the sleeve. But normally they won't be bent so bad they won't go through the axle sleeve. This particular axle has a short end and a long end. Most axles, a lot of them will just have both ends will be the same length. This one's a little unusual, but since it's that way, I'm going to shove the short end through the sleeve this way, and as I do, the axle bearing will come out, and it's inside here. So I'm just going to shove this through, all the way through the sleeve, and I'm going to hold both ends. Now, if it's a little tight, you can take a piece of block of wood and set on the end of the axle here, and then tap it with a hammer, and just ease it through. And you'll need to have somebody on the other end holding the long end of the axle so that it won't fall off when the bearing comes through. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to shove it through, and then we'll go from there. Okay, as you can see, I've shoved the axle through the axle sleeve, and there's your two-part bearing. All right. I can't do it and film at the same time, but now I'll take the axle, the bearing housing apart, and I'll show you those parts. Okay, as you can see, I've removed the two-piece axle bearing from the axle. It just comes apart. It's in two pieces. It's not bolted together or anything. It just fits together like this. A little bit greasy. That's how it looks. There's a divot there. That is where your grease fitting sets down in that divot there. When you screw it into the axle sleeve, it fits down in there. So when we put the axle back together, we want to be sure that that divot there, first off, that the bearing housing is put together where the two sides of the divot are together. And see, there's nothing on the other side. That's what that is. And of course, there's where your through bolt goes through the two parts. And the way those work is they fit on the end of the axle like this. As you can see, it rides in that groove on the end of each end of the axle has is grooved and rides in the groove on the bearing, two-piece bearing, just like that. And that's what holds the axles together. So once you get that part done, you can push the axle all on through, or just pull it back this way, depending on which way it's easiest to go. You can just pull it right back out of the sleeve. If it's a little tough or tight, sometimes they are, you can drove it in there like that, or from the other end, makes no difference, and get a piece of broomstick and put against it and just tap it through with a hammer. Don't use anything metal. Use some piece of wood is always best, because you don't want to damage the axle or the axle sleeve. All right, we're going to put it back together now, and the way you want to do that, the best way I've found is to put the large end of the axle back through the sleeve, axle sleeve. And like I say, I've got the axle sleeve caught in a vise like that. I guess I didn't say that earlier, but it's caught in the pipe part of a vise, and that's a good way to do it. So now I'm going to start putting it back together. All right, now I've got my bearing housing together on the axle. You can see it sticking out of the sleeve there a little bit, and there's the grease fitting divot. I'm going to shove the axle in to the sleeve. Now, I put a little penetrating oil on the sleeve to make it go in a little smoother. And while you shove it in, you want to be looking at this, kind of line the grease fitting hole up. You put it on top of your axle sleeve when you lock it into your vise. And you can line up this grease fitting divot there in the two-part bearing. And you can watch it as it comes in. You'll see the bearing as it goes past the grease. There it is there. See, and there's a line where it's split, and I'm going to keep shoving until I see the grease fitting divot. And there it is, up a little far. But you can line it up right there. All right, now usually we'll line up your through bolt hole too, but you can kind of wiggle it when you go to put your bolt through there. And then you'll put your grease fitting back in. So I'll do that, and we'll go from there. Okay, as you can see, I've replaced the grease fitting and the through bolt on my axle, and it's turning really well. Everything seems to be okay. That's about all there is to it. One other thing I didn't mention, if your axle, again, it's sometimes good, you can put a little penetrating oil on the axle to make it slide in and out of the axle sleeve. That helps a little bit. You'll still need to go ahead and pump this full of grease till you see some coming out the ends of your sleeve. You want to grease this till you see grease starting to come out the ends of your axle sleeve, and then you know you got enough on there. It's real important to keep this well lubricated. If you do so and you properly maintain it, should give you years of trouble-free service. But hope this helps anybody that's working with one of these, and thanks for watching.